My name is Don Lemon, an objective, not biased at all CNN journalist. My job is to tell you my truth.
My role as a journalist is to speak from my truth and from my lens and from where I come from. And I don't think those things are biases. I am a black man who grew up and who lives and survives and works in America. I have a certain perspective and a certain point of view, and I'm bringing that important part of the diverse culture of this company to the fore, and I should be. And so the people who don't want to hear that, who don't want to hear my truth, will say to you that I am biased. I'm not biased. This is my truth as a black man in America.
You mean the truth, right? Your job is to tell us the truth. Nope, I was right the first time. As an objective CNN journalist, I tell you my truth. My not biased at all personal truth. But that's contradictory.
He's not biased, guys. He's not biased at all. This is just his truth, which is bias. The definition of bias.
Anyways, let me tell you about my truth. You're going to love it.
I don't believe you for 1 second.
According to me, I'm the world's top Jesus expert. And I just want to say that you Christians are all wrong about everything you believe.
I don't do opinion. And I know that the difference for me is I do point of view. So I'm giving my point of view as an American, as a black man who happens to be gay. But I'm through that lens, but I also represent CNN.
For example, you Christians seem to think that Jesus was perfect. But admittedly, Jesus was not perfect.
But here's the thing. Jesus Christ, if that's who you believe in, Jesus Christ, admittedly was not perfect when he was here on this earth. So why are we deifying the founders of this country, many of whom own slaves?
Admittedly? Who admitted that? Hey, I'm just speaking my truth, my completely unbiased truth. What are you going to believe, God's word or my truth? The answer is my truth. You should believe my truth. Let's move on. You Christians are also completely wrong about what Jesus really looked like. You should put a black Jesus in your homes because Jesus looked like a Muslim.
And I think we should start with a true depiction of what Jesus looked like and put that in your home. Either a black Jesus or a brown Jesus, because we knew Jesus looked more like a Muslim or someone who was dark rather than someone who was blonde, a blonde-looking carpenter.
But Jesus wasn't black. And why didn't you just say Jesus looks like a Middle Eastern Jew? Because this is my truth, remember? I'm telling you my completely objective, not biased at all, personal truth. Moving on. You Christians are also wrong about your view of marriage as being between a man and a woman.
But if you believe in something that hurts another person, that does not give someone the same rights or freedoms, not necessarily under the Constitution, because this is under God, I think that that's wrong.
Why? Well, I just think it's wrong. But that's just my truth. That's right. It's my objective, not biased at all. Personal truth that you Christians should all just accept without any questions.
He rooted his understanding of marriage in the teaching in Genesis chapter 2. The teaching in Genesis chapter 2 that gave us marriage between a man and a woman for the purposes of procreation, illustration, and sanctification. He also made it very clear that what man is joined together, what God has joined together, man cannot separate. In other words, God is the author of marriage, not man. Therefore, God is the one who defines marriage, not man. Therefore, man does not have the right to introduce the concept of same-sex marriage. Number one, because by definition, it's not marriage, it's another thing. And number two, because by definition, it goes against what was created in Genesis chapter 2.
You Christians also need to re-examine your teachings because God isn't about hindering people or judging people.
And I think that the Catholic Church and many other churches really need to re-examine themselves and their teachings, because that is not what God is about. God is not about hindering people or even judging people.
But that's not what the Bible teaches.
When Jesus says, "Judge not lest you be judged," he is reflecting on the leaders of Israel who rendered final judgment on people, who literally anathematized people, who thought they were the final court. That's what he's talking about. He's not saying you can't look at people's lives and make a determination, because he says in the same breath, "By their fruits you shall know them." People don't want to talk about that. You can look at someone's life and you can see by the fruit of their life whether they have spiritual life.
Remember, we're talking about my truth, my unbiased, personal truth. I'm here to tell you Christians what to think, believe, and teach. And you should just listen to me instead of the Bible. Because, to be honest, this really has nothing to do with truth at all. It just has to do with power. I think I'm right, and I just want to force everyone who disagrees with me to change.
I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to agree with this, but don't get the vaccine, you can't go to the supermarket. Don't have the vaccine, can't go to the ball game. Don't have the vaccine, can't go to work. You don't have the vaccine, can't come here. No shirt, no shoes, no service. That's where I think we should be right now, because we continue to waste our breath on people who are just not going to change. They're, the circular logic. They just keep going back and saying, well, it's my freedom, it's whatever. I'm free. Well, your kid's not free to give other kids meningitis in schools. You got to take a vaccine to do that. You got to take vaccines in order to be employed. So what is the big deal? And all these people were saying, I don't want to put this stuff in my body. They're out drinking on the weekend and putting other substances in their bodies. That's way worse for them than a vaccine. So come on, let's be real. You can't have them speaking out of both sides of their mouth saying, I trust the science and I'm doing this. I heard you had Jerome Adams on, and he's saying, talking about some right-wing conservative propaganda hosts who are saying, oh yeah, no one really said get vaccine. They said, I believe in the science and it's up to you to get it. We can't have mealy-mouthed people like that. You have to be more direct. A more concerted effort to say get vaccinated, because you're not just killing yourself, you're going to kill other people. That's what you have to start telling people. You got to start telling people, if you don't get vaccinated, you can't come into this office or this place of business. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't come to work. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't come into this gym. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't come into get onto this airplane. It has nothing to do with freedom. It has nothing to do with liberty. You don't have the freedom and the liberty to put other people in jeopardy. You don't have that. You have to drive the speed limit.
You're satisfied to place this burden on children anyway. And why? It's not to keep them safe. It's not to keep the adults safe. They can all get vaccinated if they want. No, you do it to make yourselves feel better and to protect yourselves politically.
You see, I have an agenda. I'll support any narrative that furthers my agenda. And I'll work to discredit anyone who says anything against my agenda. A perfect example of this is the interview I did with actor Terry Crews, which nobody liked. But I'm sure the problem is them, not me. Just take a look at this perfectly reasonable tweet from Terry.
All right, everybody, please listen to this segment, because actor and activist Terry Crews facing backlash for tweeting, "We must ensure Black Lives Matter doesn't morph into Black Lives Better." Here's how he explained it. Are all white people bad? No. Are all black people good? No. Knowing this reality, I stand on my decision to unite with good people, no matter the race, creed, or ideology. Given the number of threats against this decision, I also decide to die on this hill.
Now watch me treat this perfectly reasonable tweet as the craziest thing anyone has ever said.
Terry Crews joins me now. Terry, man, you stepped in it. You say that you're willing you say you're willing to die on this hill. You've taken a lot of heat for this. Explain what you were thinking and why it's so important that you die on this hill.
Again, let's watch Terry Crews say some things to me that are completely true.
And when you have the leaders of the Black Lives Movement who are now talking about, if we don't get our demands, we're going to burn it down. Other Black people who are talking about working with other whites and other races, they're being viewed as sellouts or called Uncle Toms. You start to understand that you are now, being controlled. You're not being treated as loved. You're actually being controlled. Someone wants to control the narrative. And I viewed it as a very, very dangerous self-righteousness that was developing that really viewed themselves as better. It was almost a supremacist move.
So let me jump in,
where
Terry.
they viewed that their Black lives mattered a lot more than mine.
Okay.
Can you believe that? Terry thinks there are major problems with the Black Lives Matter leaders and organization. Now watch as I defend this organization that openly advocated for destruction and riots across the nation.
On top of that, we also spoke to Hawk Newsom, who is a leader of the Greater New York BLM group, who said that this verdict actually justifies the violent and the nonviolent protests. He says that it was the violent protests and the rioting that actually helped bring about this verdict.
So let me jump in here. There's a lot that you said. You think if Black Lives Matter is, you said you think it's an extreme movement? Because it's now part of the...
No, this is the thing. It's a great mantra. It's a true mantra. Black lives do matter. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders, you're talking about the people who are responsible for putting these things together.
I got you. So let me,
but different things.
Terry, you realize that even during the civil rights movement that Dr. King was seen as extreme. That movement was seen as extreme. To people who don't want to make change, movements are seen as extreme. You can paint them easily as an extreme when they are not.
My truth tells me that Black Lives Matter isn't an extreme organization, even though its leaders openly admit to being trained Marxists.
They actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
And even though its website advocated for disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure.
Visit the Black Lives Matter website and read the list of demands to get a sense of how deep a transformation they seek. One of those demands proclaims, quote, "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another."
And even though it advocated for destruction and riots all across the country.
Overnight, Minneapolis on fire. Protesters leaving an auto parts store in flames. Others seen looting a local Target.
I'm now going to teach Terry that Black Lives Matter isn't really about saving Black lives. It's about furthering the dishonest agenda that equality doesn't exist in the United States today, even though there's no real evidence for that.
White family worth, in terms of financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't, you know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
According to my truth, I'm oppressed simply for being black. I don't experience equality even though I'm an incredibly successful, completely objective CNN journalist today. Now, Let's watch Terry once again make some very reasonable, very fair criticisms against the Black Lives Matter leaders and organization.
And you're talking about even with the Atlanta child murders, there were 28 kids who died in 2 years. You're talking about a month, and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this.
What does that have to do with equality, though, Terry? I don't understand what that has to do with equality, because listen, there's crime. There are people in those communities those people aren't just being nonchalant about gun violence. I lived in Chicago. There are many people who are working in those communities to try to get rid of the gun violence. The gun culture in this country is prevalent, but I don't understand what that has to do with a movement that's for equality for black people. It's not mutually exclusive that if you care about equality for black people, that somehow you're going to stop random violence or, unfortunately, kids from being shot. It just seems like apples and oranges.
Now watch me teach silly Terry that, of course, Black Lives Matter isn't really about all Black lives mattering. It's just about furthering the narrative that the police are hunting down black people in the streets, which, of course, isn't supported by the evidence.
Because if you look at the Washington Post database of how many people in America were black and unarmed and shot by police in 2019, this is the Washington Post database, the answer in 2019 was 9. If you want to talk about the number of black Americans who were shot who are unarmed and who are not fleeing from police, the answer is 3.
Okay, Terry,
I became sick. Like if I told you to wear a mask,
but Terry,
they want to kick you out.
You're a high-profile person. You're writing things out there. You know you're going to get backlash. You know people are going to respond to what you're saying on Twitter. So I don't think you should be surprised by that. I have a skin as tough as an armadillo because of what I do, and I think maybe you should adapt that. But here's what I have to say. The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality. If you want an all Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, black communities, then start that movement with that name. But that's not what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not an all-encompassing.
My truth is important. It's what's most important. And as an objective, not biased at all, CNN journalist, I'm here to do everything I can to brainwash you with and force you to accept my truth.
Well, it's a lion, a hippo, and a camel.
Isn't that a rhino in the middle?
A rhino.
You don't even know a hippo from a rhino. You got no acuity, son. You got no acuity.
I'm looking at it backwards.
What does it mean if you don't know an elephant from a rhino?